This video is probably going to get me a little bit of hate, but my intentions are really never to criticize anyone. I kind of want everybody to succeed, and if your goal is to become a better power lifter or increase your 1 rep max at any one lift, I really think that lifting for YouTube is holding a lot of lifters back. And I'll tell you what I mean. So I do get a lot of criticism. I get criticism for squat depth. If I do rack pulls, they talk about like, oh, it's not full range of motion. If I'm doing AMRAP sets on the bench, I might do touch and go. I get criticism for not locking out or not going all the way down. If I'm doing certain sets of deadlifts, I might do touch and go, and I'll get criticism saying, well, that's easier than, doing resetting each deadlift, and it's easier because you're bouncing, and all of that's true. Every last one of those is true. Those are all things that will make doing higher rep sets easier. But what if I told you that by you not doing those, you're leaving a ton of gains on the table that will all translate to a higher 1 rep maximum, if that's your goal? So a lot of people that I talk to kind of ask me, well, how come you don't really compete with the guys online? They do the 4 lifts thing, and guys are continually trying to outdo each other. And I tell them it's because it takes away from what my ultimate goal is, which is to take the national records for the United States Powerlifting Association, Masters 45 to 49, 198 weight class. That's my goal. That's my singular goal, and that's why I'm training so hard. And it's I plan to compete a couple months from now, and I'm not there yet. I'm not where I need to be. So by me stopping my program and trying to best people, it kind of throws my program out of whack, and it derails me from that ultimate goal, which is why I won't do it. Now, I do have certain weeks where I do heavy singles, and if that happens to coincide with that, then I'm more than happy to try to show off a lift. But if it's not part of my program, I'm not going to do it. So what I really wanted to do with this video is go into some of the popular or different variations that I do and explain why I do them and how they help. And I still wanted to start out with the deadlift one because that's the most common one, the touch and go AMRAP sets. That's where I will do as many reps as possible, and I will just barely touch the barbell to the ground and try to leave constant tension. Now, it is absolutely true that touch and go sets are much, much, much easier than full reset sets, and you can absolutely do more reps if you do touch and go than if you do full resets. So if my goal was to try to beat somebody doing full reset sets, then I would obviously want to do that, but that is not why I do them. I do touch and go sets specifically because they keep constant tension on the back, and I kind of treat them as like a single lift. So if my heavy singles week calls for 4 sets of heavy singles, I'm going to do 4 sets of touch and go sets. Now, why would I want to do these? Because the downside to them is they are really, really, really hard on your posterior chain, and you have to spend a lot more time recovering from them. And there's a way higher risk of injury because of the constant tension on the back. Well, I would do them specifically where if I'm stuck at a certain weight and I'm trying to break a plateau, I consider those to be a form of overloading. Overloading would also include rack pulls and things of that nature, where you shorten the range of motion and you add more weight than you could pull to the bar. And it basically, rack pulls are good if you're trying to work on a specific range of motion. Touch and go sets are great if you're just stuck at the floor and you're trying to break a plateau. So for me, that plateau was 600. I was stuck at the 600 mark for a few months. So I started doing these touch and go sets. And if you look back at my my historical videos, you'll notice that I've been doing touch and go sets for about 2 months now. And wouldn't you know it, I busted through that 600 plateau, and now I'm doing 620. Now that might not sound like a lot, but I'm 47 years old. I weigh 198 pounds. Adding 20 pounds to a deadlift is huge. And I do believe that I'm going to be able to do more because I felt like I had more in me. But that's neither here nor there. That's just one variation. Now, the other variation that people are often criticized for is the rack pull. You put straps on, you add 50 to 100 pounds more than you can deadlift, and you pull off of a rack that's higher than the floor, which shortens the range of motion, making it so that you can pull more. And a lot of criticism is that, oh, well, you can't really deadlift that much. You're cheating. You've got straps. And, that would be true if that's what you were trying to show off as or represent as what your ability to lift was. But you're leaving a lot on the table if you don't do them, if, like, say, your sticking point is lockout. Because now you can do heavy overloads and you can work on that specific sticking point. So why would you not do those if it's going to translate to your 1 rep max? Another often criticized variation that I'll perform is the touch and go bench press, where I don't lock out all the way and I barely touch my chest. So I'm keeping constant tension on that range of motion. That's about an inch off the chest and an inch before the elbows lock out. Now, what YouTube demands is that you touch your chest, you pause, and you lock your arms all the way out. Otherwise, what is it? You're cheating. You're not doing a full rep. Well, that's fine and dandy if you're competing with other people on YouTube. But if your goal is to get a higher 1 rep maximum on the bench press, you're leaving a ton on the table if you don't perform these. A popular variation would be the Spoto press. Eric Spoto used to do this bench press where he would do about 70% of his 1 rep max, and he would go about 4 inches above his chest and about 3 inches before his elbows locked out, and he would just do these huge high volume sets. We're talking sets of 20, 25, 30, and he would just burn that out. Now, Eric was an arm wrestler, so he was doing bench press to train for arm wrestling. He never had an intention of being a world record bench presser. It just so happened that one day his arm wrestling guy said, "Hey, you know that the weight you're benching just so happens to be a super physiological amount, and you're up there close to, the world record." And Eric became a bench specialist, and he did break the world record. But those lifts he was doing, he was never, I talked to him personally, he was never ever training to beat the world record. He was training to be a better arm wrestler. The Spoto press, of course, is ubiquitous with benchers around the world. And if you were doing them on YouTube, YouTube would criticize you because it looks like you're cheating. You're not going down all the way, you're not going up all the way, and you're just trying to show everybody how many reps you can do. No, that is absolutely not the point of that exercise. The point of that exercise is for hypertrophy, and it helps you break through plateaus, and it'll translate directly to your 1 rep max, which, if that's what your goal is, then you're leaving a ton on the table if you don't do those. Squats. Now, I can constantly get criticism for squat depth, and I constantly ignore the criticism for squat depth because I don't really care if I hit depth or not. If I'm, trying to get stronger and I go, let's say I add 10 pounds more than I did last week and I could barely squat it and I don't go down all the way, that's great. That's a gym lift. Post it. Put it on the internet. The only time squat depth matters is when you're on the platform and there's 3 judges, 2 on the side, 1 in the front, and they're going to judge whether or not your lift counts in competition. No serious power lifter gives a crap what your gym lifts look like. And there's a ton of squat variations that will help you add tons to your 1 rep max that do not require depth. Some of those are the dynamic box squats, where you're about 2 inches above parallel. Some are the Henderson squat, where you set a rack about mid-height and you're going to overload that. You're going to put about 100 pounds more than you can squat on it. And think of it like rack pulls for squats. And there's a ton of variations where you're not going to hit depth. But that also assumes that you're doing full range of motion exercises to compensate for the lower end. So for bench, I'm going to use the cambered bar, and I'm going to go about 4 inches deeper than I normally would. For squats, I might do front squats where I'm going way below depth that I would ever attempt on the platform, things of that nature. So we're actually breaking down and we're working through the full range of motion. And I don't often showcase those exercises on YouTube, so people just automatically assume that I never do them. But that's just silly. I'm just like everybody else. I like to try to show off how strong I am, so oftentimes I'll just post my really big lifts. But if I were to post every mundane little exercise I do where I rotate through the variations, I do an unbelievable amount of work that's way below parallel. So, it is what it is. You can lift for YouTube or you can lift for competition goals, but you can't serve two masters. What I'm noticing is when guys are competing on YouTube, they're doing what's called linear progression. And that is with perfect form, every single rep. And the detractors will accept nothing else. If you don't hit depth and you don't lock out all the way, you're just going to get a bunch of crap from everybody. And I'm here to tell you right now that is going to hold you back. Linear progression works great for beginners who just start. And what that is you start with a weight. And every week you do the same reps and you add weight to the bar. And you keep doing that. But eventually you're going to hit a plateau. The human body was not made to progress in a linear fashion forever. It just can't be done. Every single lifter is going to hit a plateau. And then what do? Well, you just keep grinding and grinding and grinding, and you keep adding ounces and pounds to the bar, and slowly but surely, if you keep at it over time, you will get a little bit stronger. And eventually you might, be pretty strong. But what if I were to tell you that by skipping all these variations and leaving all these lifts on the table simply because you're worried about what YouTube's going to tell you about it, you are just leaving tons of gains behind, and you could get stronger way faster by mixing your program up, changing your variations, working and overloading through the different rep ranges, not doing full range of motion lifts, doing farther than range of motion lifts, breaking down your sticking points, working that range of motion with heavier than normal assisted lifts. You could do things like band squats, reverse band squats, chains, the shaker bar squats. You could do, everything. I do it all. I like to change my foot stance. I like to change my grip width. Basically, whenever you hit a plateau, the best way to break that plateau is to do something slightly different. So it forces an adaptation that your body's not accustomed to. Now, I used to train Westside, and the big thing about the conjugate system was that they were always worried about repetitive motion stress. They used to say you want to keep your mileage as low as possible. So if you're doing the same movements day in, day out, like overhead presses, deadlifts, squats, bench, and you use the same form, and you use the same grip width, and you use the same depth, and you lock out every time, you are going to eventually invite a repetitive motion injury. So what we like to do is we like to change up the variations. If you're a conventional puller, maybe do sumo for a while. If you're a wide grip bencher, bring your grip in. If all you do is bench with an arch and a decline, maybe do some incline presses, floor presses, that sort of thing. You want to change up the variations. Squats are a big one. I'll start with a narrow stance, and through my training, I'll work my stance out, and I'll change it sometimes as much as a foot. Well, that's the same thing with range of motion. You don't want to stay with the same rep scheme. You don't want to stay with the same movement pattern, because you're going to eventually get hurt and you're not going to be well-rounded. So also by doing these overload high rep sets where maybe you're not locking out, or maybe you are cutting your range of motion short so that you can get extra reps in, you're also killing two birds with one stone, because you're throwing hypertrophy into the mix, which is going to translate to a pretty decent physique, assuming that your diet's on point. Now, let's talk about steroids, because that's a common criticism that's leveraged towards me. And I get this a lot from lifters who really haven't improved much over a vast period of time. And they see me lifting and they see my numbers shooting up and they just say, well, you do steroids, so that doesn't count. One, I don't. I haven't done steroids in over a year, except for testosterone replacement therapy. And two, even if I was doing steroids, they don't count for as much as most people think that they do. You don't need to do a huge amount of steroids to get results, and the results that you're going to get from them are going to be still largely dependent on the amount of work and programming that you're willing to put in. So the idea that you can just take a mountain of pharmaceuticals and then, do a little bit of lifting and then wake up looking like Ronnie Coleman is patently absurd. So is the idea that you need to do a lot of drugs in order to get a great physique. So some people respond really, really well to drugs. Some people hardly respond to drugs. And we are all different, and we basically all respond differently to different stimuluses. And the only way you're going to know if you're a hyper responder or not is to try it. But I don't advocate for steroid use simply because the short amount of time that I was using steroids, I had what could have potentially been some really negative health effects. And I found that I was not knowledgeable enough to, be self-medicating myself. And I would not, under any circumstances, advocate doing anything without the supervision of a health professional or somebody that's extremely knowledgeable in the field. And I would also suggest that you do a mountain of research before you made that decision. Now, I am a 47-year-old lifter. It is not uncommon for guys over the age of 40 to go on testosterone. I don't really even think that's controversial, and I would even go so far as to say that I am glad I did it, and I would make that decision 100 times over. It has improved the quality of my life exponentially, and I feel most days like a 20-year-old again. And to me, if modern Western medicine can provide me with a better quality of life and allow me to keep doing the sport that I love, I'm going to make absolutely no apologies for it. But again, I want to see people be healthy. I want to see them make smart decisions. So I would under no circumstances advocate steroid use at all, ever. I also don't judge you, though. Like, if that's something that you decided to do, and that's a risk that you're willing to take, as long as you're competing in an untested division with other people that are allowed to have the same advantages that you have, then I don't see anything wrong with it. I mean, I compete in an untested division specifically for that reason. And I'll tell you what, a lot of the guys my age that are still competing, it would surprise you both, A, how many of them are still natural, and B, how much drugs the ones that do use drugs are using. It runs the full gamut. Just like everything else, there's a lot of misconceptions behind it. And the idea that, you could just take steroids and be an elite level lifter is just patently absurd. If you weren't an elite level lifter before you started using steroids, the chances that you're going to become one after you start using them, I don't think you're going to get the results that you think you're going to get from them. I was a completely 100% natural lifter until the age of 45, and I was competing at a reasonably high level up to that. And if you were to compare my physique when I was 45 to what I look like now, I'm really not a whole lot different. I'm a little bit bigger, I'm a little bit crisper, I'm a little bit sharper, but for the most part, I was about the same size. So, I mean, you can say whatever you want, but that's the truth. Like, I really actually want to be as transparent as possible, because like I said, I want to see people succeed. I want to see people get stronger. Even the guys that kind of give me crap, and assuming that we're all being playful, like even the ones that have given me hateful comments in the past, I even want to see you guys get stronger. And my big suggestion is don't listen to YouTube so much. If you have a lift that's going to help you get stronger, but you're afraid to do it because you think that your friends online are going to give you crap if you post videos about it, don't post videos about it. Just do the lift anyways, though. Don't not do the lift, miss out on the gains, and then, I don't know. I see these, I believe it or not, I've checked most of your pages out, and I've watched the way you guys lift. You guys are all really strong. You guys all have good looking lifts, great form, and the motor paths that you've built up, they were really good at accommodating the lifts that you do. But I've also noticed that there's an almost ideological possession that you have about sticking to really strict form or adhering to these stupid rules that YouTube has for showing lifts off without being criticized. And I really think that if you guys mixed it up a little bit and tried some of this like undulating periodization or wave periodization blocks, where you dump the weight and you go for heavy high rep sets and you work your way back up to 1 rep max weeks using block periodization, and you changed up your rep ranges, and you changed up your range of motion, and you changed up your grips, and you maybe didn't worry about satisfying the form police, you would see that you would bust through those plateaus whether you're natural or not, and you would make progress that you never thought you were capable of before.